We finally know who Michigan is going to be playing for the next 5 years. And depending on how you look at it, I mean, it's gonna be fun as long as you like the big name matchups, but it's going to be very, very hard. Some other teams got off, let's just say, scot-free. Let's talk about all of the new schedule on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Thursday. We are back in doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Holt, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. And the Big Ten dropped all of the opponents that every team in the new look conference will face. This is, of course, before they expand again and redo it all together. But it is something, man. It is absolutely something when it comes to Michigan. I got it all right here. Let's not even dilly-dally. So Michigan has 5 home games in conference this next year. In alphabetical order, you got Michigan State, Minnesota, Northwestern. Those should all be wins. Michigan State, you never really know, and we don't even know who their coach is, and all this kind of stuff. Things can change year over year. I would pencil in Michigan for a win even on that one. Minnesota's kind of a similar deal. You do know who their coach is probably going to be, but Northwestern's a dumpster fire. But then the other 2 home games is you get Oregon and USC coming to the big house in year 1. That's pretty awesome, right? But then you also have on the road at Illinois. If that was last year, then that would be daunting, but whatever. Indiana, okay, fine, fair. Ohio State, you expect that. That's going to always be a challenge. And then they got their West Coast road trip to Washington. So that's what that is. That's what. Let's take a step back here. Let's also remember that Michigan plays Arkansas State, Texas, and Fresno State all at home. Let's count it up here a little bit. Let's go to the AP rankings real fast. Michigan, who is number 2 right now, next year will host in week 2, number 3, Texas. In week 13, it will go to number 4, Ohio State. Of course, this is going to change. Michigan does get to skip number 6, Penn State. It would have been a home game, but they get to skip Penn State. But then they do get to go to number 7, Washington at some point. Then they also host number 8, Oregon. And number 9, USC. That is the current rankings. Just kind of going through the rest of the top 25. Oh, look at that. Number 24, Fresno State. Coming to the big house week 3. It is going to be as unforgiving of a schedule as you can even imagine. Others receiving votes, UCLA is on there. But Michigan doesn't play UCLA. Michigan also avoids Wisconsin, who's also receiving votes. And also avoids Maryland, which is the top receiving votes and should be ranked. It's ridiculous that LSU is ranked and Maryland is not. Maybe that'll change after this week. Maybe it won't. We'll see. But it is as hard of a schedule as I think I have ever seen any team play. It is absolutely absurd what Michigan has to go up and face. And if you're sitting there asking and you're saying, well, I mean, Wolverines aren't the only team probably that has to face all of these schools, right? Like, surely there are other teams out there that have to face the same 3. Well, you would be wrong. Michigan's the only one that gets the 3 tougher of the 4. Now, UCLA's no slouch right now, right? I mean, they aren't, and Chip Kelly coaches them. Dante Moore, we all know that name. But no, that is the only one. When you look at their schedule, that has those 3 teams on them, the 3 harder of the 3. The luck part is that you got to only travel for one, and that is to Washington at some point. Now, Penn State, they've got UCLA, Washington, and USC. Avoids Oregon. Also does have to play Ohio State. So, I mean, their schedule is relatively tough. Minnesota, Purdue, USC, and Wisconsin on the road. Penn State at the Coliseum. That's cool. And they host Illinois, Maryland, Ohio State, UCLA, and Washington. So theirs is also relatively difficult. You look at some of the other schools in the Big Ten that are joining the Big Ten. Oregon has home games against Illinois, Maryland, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Washington. Okay, they get Ohio State at home, so that's great for them. They go on the road to Michigan, Purdue, UCLA, and Wisconsin. Michigan and Wisconsin, certainly UCLA. I mean, that's tough. USC has 4 home games. They host Nebraska, Penn State, Rutgers, and Wisconsin. So having to play Penn State and Wisconsin certainly can be challenging. It's going to be funny watching USC Rutgers. That's just weird. But on the road, they go 5 times. They go Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, UCLA, and Washington. So Michigan is the tough road game for them. Let's look at UCLA real quick. UCLA's home games are Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, Oregon, USC. So they would have played Oregon and USC anyway. They host Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota. Iowa is obviously and always going to be an interesting thing. They go to Nebraska, Penn State, Rutgers, and Washington. And then let's look at Washington. 4 home games: Michigan, Northwestern, UCLA, and USC. Getting the Michigan home game obviously is going to be their marquee one, aside from the ones that they were already going to play. They travel to Indiana, Iowa, Oregon, Penn State, and Rutgers. Notice I'm not saying a lot of Ohio State, right? I'm not saying a heck of a lot. Before we get to Ohio State, let's go to Michigan State, who home games against none of the new ones. None of them. Indiana, Iowa, Ohio State, Purdue, and Rutgers. On the road, Michigan State goes to Illinois, to Maryland, to Michigan, to Oregon. Now they just played Washington 2 straight years. I would have liked to see, them add maybe UCLA at the very least. They didn't. Ohio State. What does Ohio State get? Ohio State also only draws one of the 4. Home games against Indiana, Iowa, Michigan, Nebraska, Purdue. Away to Michigan State, Northwestern, Oregon, who they just had the home and home with Oregon, and Penn State. Come on now. What is this? Okay, at least they got Penn State on there. Oregon's obviously a tough team. But their home slate, really? You're sitting there trying to figure out who Ohio State's going to play, and you're like, oh, let's give them Indiana and Purdue. Let's toss Iowa in there, Nebraska. All right, congratulations on going getting 4 wins out of that, Ohio State. Michigan, we'll see. Away, Michigan State, obvious win. Northwestern, obvious win. Oregon and Penn State are the toss-ups. They have 3 games that are toss-ups. Michigan plays 6 teams that are currently ranked next year. Now, okay, I'm not including Ohio State's non-conference. I don't remember who they play offhand. But I know that they have a pretty decent, let's see. We're going to look it up real fast. We're just going to look up Ohio State non-conference schedule for next year. And we'll see what that's all about. So, okay, yeah, real difficult non-conference schedule. So I understand. Ohio State plays Southern Miss, Western Michigan, and Marshall. All 3 at the shoe. That's difficult, right? Whenever Western Michigan comes to town, you're in for a battle. So I know this is the same schedule that Michigan's got right now, right? It's the same exact thing. But at the same time, it's every other school feels like it's getting beaten down to some degree. Michigan's got the brunt of it for whatever reason. Rutgers has got USC, UCLA, and Washington at least. They play a respectable schedule. Almost everyone else plays a respectable schedule. Michigan State and Ohio State, now they just get to kind of skirt, right? It's kind of funny looking at USC. It's USC doesn't have... They don't have an easy schedule either. Penn State, Wisconsin at home, Michigan, Maryland on the road, Minnesota, especially depending on when that is. If that's late in the year, then that could be a little something. But I mean, it's kind of wild. We're going to get to some of these other, because like I said, 4 years worth of total schedules. We're going to do the next couple years and just look at what's interesting and kind of go through it for Michigan at least. And we'll at least compare with maybe Ohio State and stuff like that. And then we're going to move on. That's how we're going to do it. All right. But before we do that, Listen, there's so many times that I've had to worry about trying to get the concert tickets. I'm a last minute buyer, right? Like I think it was last year when I was like, I'm going to go see Deftones today. And I did that. And I did that with sporting events. I did, wake up and I'm like, I'm going to go to the Tigers ALCS game against the Oakland A's in 2006. I'm going to go to the Pistons, the Eastern Conference Finals in 2004 and see them play the Pacers. I make these decisions last minute, and it's a really stressful situation. If I would have had game time, I wouldn't have had any of those issues. You don't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. And the great thing is they've got killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, the best price guarantee. Game time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, easy to find, and you can buy tickets for every kind of event, concerts, theaters, sports, comedy, whatever it is. And the coolest thing is the views from your seat. I love that so much. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See the view from your seat before you buy. You know exactly what you're getting. All in prices that show your total up front, not a bunch of hidden fees, all that kind of junk. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps, and guess what? You can buy tickets even after the event started. That's the most amazing part. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first order. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so we've already covered 2024, 2025. It's a little bit easier. There's no Oregon on the schedule for Michigan. No Penn State for the second consecutive year, so that's good news. Still have Michigan State and Ohio State, 4 home games for Michigan in 2025. They do host Washington, so for it's 4 years in between. That's fine. Wisconsin's back on the schedule. This schedule with the addition of USC, which is away, is pretty close to what 2021 was, right? In a lot of ways, you got. Not completely, right? You got home games against Ohio State and Washington. Instead of going to Wisconsin like they did in 2021, they host Wisconsin. Purdue comes to the Big House. Obviously, they weren't on the schedule. The road games are at Maryland. That tracks. Same deal as 2021. At Michigan State. That tracks. At Nebraska. That's a new one. So they don't get the home visit from Nebraska in between. They just get to go to Nebraska. I'm fine with that. I like Nebraska. They go to Northwestern. That's like a home game, and they go to USC. So that's fun. Does Ohio State's get any more difficult? Surely it's going to get a heck of a lot more difficult, right? They're gonna go to the Coliseum, all that kind of stuff. Nope. Home games: Minnesota, Penn State, Rutgers, UCLA. So they host UCLA, and then away games. They're going to go to Washington. They're going to go to Wisconsin. They're going to go to Michigan, Purdue, and Illinois. So still. They're still avoiding it. They'll go there eventually, right? They'll go there eventually. When they get around to it. Whenever the Buckeyes feel like it, then they'll go check out LA, see what that's all about, and then they'll report back surely. Michigan State at least gets to. Their schedule got a little bit more difficult because they go to USC. They obviously still have Michigan on the schedule. They have Penn State, but no Ohio State, right? Note that they had Ohio State. Now all of a sudden, Michigan State doesn't even play Ohio State in a year. So that was bound to happen. Penn State, they host Oregon. 3 really easy ones. They go to Iowa. They go to Michigan State, Ohio State, Rutgers, and UCLA. So again, Michigan's a little bit easier, but they still have 2 of the 3 on top of having Ohio State on the schedule, which is never going away, and nor should it, obviously. 2026, that one, Michigan gets a little respite. No USC, no Oregon, no Washington. Finally, 2026, even with Oklahoma on the schedule, you can relax a little bit because you host Penn State. You host Michigan State, you host Iowa, Indiana, and UCLA, and then you go on the road just to Minnesota, Well, they do have Oregon on there. Ohio State, Oregon, and Rutgers. So you still have 2. So surely Ohio State is doing a lot harder things, right? And they finally kind of are. They got home game against Oregon. Last time that Oregon came to Columbus went really well for anyone who doesn't like Ohio State. And then they go to USC. Have Michigan on the home schedule. Everyone else is easy. So finally, we're at 2027. I forgot there were 5 years, not 4 years. Michigan hosts Oregon, hosts Ohio State, Illinois, Rutgers. Michigan in the year in which they go to Texas. Remember, they go to Penn State, they go to Michigan State, they go to UCLA, they go to Iowa, they go to Indiana. So if it's a night game at Kinnick, it's a night game at Penn State, whatever. 2028, final year of the schedule that's been released. Michigan hosts USC. Michigan hosts Northwestern, Nebraska, Michigan State, and Maryland. They go to Ohio State. They go to Purdue, Washington, and Wisconsin. Ohio State loses USC on the schedule again. They just got lost, right? They had their 1 year, 2 years rather. They had 2 years of USC, and it was all done. They saw what happens in LA. They reported back. Don't need to schedule them anymore if they're any good. Meanwhile, Ohio State does go to Penn State, goes to UCLA. Everything else is nice and simple, nice and easy. Fun times to be had by all. So here's the thing. It's just kind of funny to see, and I'm not really sure. Like Ohio State has some years here where they obviously they got Michigan on the schedule every year, just like Michigan has Ohio State on, and they play USC. It seems like most other schools aren't going to get all of it, right? Michigan gets the full wrath of the Big Ten. That said, I'm excited about it, right? Like this is I'm not sitting here. I know it's like, it sounds like I'm angry about it. And I do think it's a little unfair compared to what other teams are getting, right? Like no one else has this kind of craziness about it. And every single team, I believe, has a West Coast trip, right? Because that's only fair, right? Like USC's away games, they have to go to Maryland this next year, to Michigan, to Minnesota. That's 3 games. UCLA has to go to Nebraska. That's halfway across the country, not all the way, but they do go to Rutgers and they go to Penn State. Oregon goes to Michigan, to Purdue, to Wisconsin. So it's only fair that I think the East Coast teams get that West Coast trip once a year. That's fair. I do believe that everyone has one every single year. So that absolutely makes sense. And as far as I'm looking at it, that does seem to be the case. Everyone has that one West Coast game. But Michigan really got the brunt of it. Let's continue into that because I realize that we're taking a lot of time just kind of going over what it is. And we'll get the full reaction here in just a moment. But before we do that, listen, do you want to be in the Comfort Kingdom? Do you want to be a part of that? Well, I've got just the thing for you, and that's Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs, and I lost what I had up here, so bear with me. Bird Dogs is revolutionizing comfort when it comes to your pants and shorts. Whether you're looking for something dressy for the gym, going out on the lake, obviously now it's probably a little bit more apple picking, pumpkin patch, all of that. Guess what? Bird Dog has every single thing you need. It can be shorts, it can be pants, it can be whatever. They got polos. You can do anything you want. You'll look and you'll feel better by wearing Bird Dogs. They allow you the versatility of going from the golf course, even in the fall, to the office, to a restaurant, whatever you want to do. And guess what? They also do the same exact thing as Lululemon. They just fit way better. So go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege and enter the promo code LockedOnCollege for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege. Promo code LockedOnCollege for a free Yeti style tumbler. You don't want to take your Bird Dogs off. I can promise you that. All right, so let's actually break it down here. And by the way, we'll have our three more episodes this week. It's all kind of topsy-turvy, especially with these longer road trips, since I'm again driving to Minnesota. it's just taking a little bit. I have to do more things, around the house. I have to also do some things like my grandma's watching Zuri for the weekend and all of this stuff. It just takes a little bit more preparation and stuff like that. So we will have a Friday night episode. We'll have a Saturday morning episode, or at least early afternoon, probably before the games start. We'll have a Saturday episode. And then we'll have definitely not a Saturday night. We'll have I'm going to, I think, bring my tripod and it won't be up until night, but we'll have a drive home episode is the plan. If all goes to plan. I'm going to set up my tripod since my phone mount thing didn't work like I had planned. Anyway, that's the housekeeping of the show. And we'll have our 5. I mean, it's kind of for the week, but we had a Sunday episode. We're figuring it out as we go along here. So we'll have the mailbag tomorrow. So get your questions in for that. I think we'll have it tomorrow. It might be Saturday because we'll do a Minnesota preview mailbag. We'll figure it all out. Anyway, so yeah, Michigan kind of got the brunt of the wrath of the Big Ten here, right? Like it's just more difficult for the Wolverines. Like I said, like even just in this Big Ten, I mean, you got Ohio State, Washington, Oregon, USC. That's 4 teams that are currently ranked in the top 10. That's not even counting Texas. It's not counting Fresno State, who's currently ranked. We'll see where Fresno State ends up by the end of the year. I can't imagine. I haven't gone through and parsed through to see if anyone else has a schedule that's that difficult. But after the last couple of non-conference, right, this year, last year, it's like the Big Ten's like, okay, well, you had your fun, but there you go. The question is how much leeway will Michigan get when it comes to the playoff? A 12-team playoff starting next year. So, I mean, theoretically, they could lose 3 if they're close, right? Like if it's like, okay, they lost to Washington, who, they didn't lose any games, or lost to Ohio State, who, by just a handful of points, something like that. Lose to USC, in some kind of weird thing. I mean, you can get away potentially with 3 losses if you look good doing it somehow, right? Like, I don't think that they can get blown out and whatever. I'm sure that some people, like the college football playoff committee, is going to sit there and say, all right, Michigan played about as hard of a schedule as anyone can play. The only other team I feel like has got a difficult road to hoe here is USC, because USC goes to Michigan. They have Washington and UCLA still on the schedule. No Oregon this time. They host Penn State. They host Wisconsin. They still have to play Notre Dame. So to me, that's probably the hardest one. But when you look at the teams that Ohio State plays, I mean, Penn State, that maybe is the other difficult one, but they don't have Michigan. They have USC. They have Ohio State. They have Washington on the schedule. That's a little bit more difficult than some of the others. But Michigan's just a murderer's row, right? Like you might find yourself getting past USC and Oregon and then losing to like Minnesota, just because it's just a murderer's row. Now, if Michigan, which might have a new look team, right? Like we do expect Jim Harbaugh to be back. I'm 50-50 on if JJ McCarthy stays or goes. Right now, he's being mocked number 5 by CBS and PFF overall. So, I mean, if he's a 5th round, not 5th round, but like number 5 overall, I mean, if I was JJ, I'd be like, see ya. And I would advise him, like, I understand you want to be a team captain. You want all those types of things that would lure you back, but don't be foolish. Go. Right. That would be my advice. You might not like it, but that's my advice if he's going to be like top 10 draft pick. So you might go in the transfer portal. You might just say, let's Jaden Davis it. You might say, Alex Orji, it's your time. I don't know exactly how that goes. Very little room for error. And it starts right away, right? I mean, if Texas might, I mean, here's the good news. Here's the other thing. Texas could lose Quinn Ewers, right? Xavier Worthy, those guys could go in the draft. So week 2 might feel a little less daunting compared to what it is right this second. I don't know anything about Fresno State offhand. I just know that they tend to be really good. Ohio State probably going to have Kyle McCord again. I can't imagine, unless he just ascends highly, that he's going to be going here after his junior year. Washington's going to lose Michael Penix, so that's good news. Oregon, I believe, would be losing Bo Nix, so that's good news. So really, you're looking at, I don't know if Luke Altmaier is still going to be at Illinois or not. I don't know his eligibility at this point. I know he came from Ole Miss. Is Taven Jackson going to continue on at Indiana? Probably. Michigan State, that's a complete wild card at the moment. Minnesota, Ethan Kaliak-Manis probably set. Northwestern with Ben Bryant. Okay. So at least and Caleb Williams at USC gone. So it feels daunting right now. But you might have a situation where you just have a lot of quarterbacks that are starting in, and it could be a Wild West, right? The good news for Michigan is that 3 of those really tough games next year, I think, 2 of them, Oregon, USC at home. Ohio State, Washington, you hope that Washington is early in the season, right? Or at least the middle of the season, because you don't want it to be like, oh, they go to Washington and then they play Ohio State. You hope that Washington game has got at least a little bit of a buffer there. It's daunting, but it can be done, right? As we've seen this year, college football can flip in a hurry, right? Like you look at Alabama, Georgia, kind of not necessarily being fully as dominant as you expected. Ohio State, Michigan's going to be probably in those same shoes next year. Maybe it's not, but Jim Harbaugh said 20 guys could go to the draft, and ESPN said, yeah, we got like 17 guys going. Still would break the record. Could lose the whole team. So it's going to be a weird year, and it very well, it could be 6-6. It could be 9-3. It could be 12-0. Who knows? 12-0. Definitely not predicting that next year. It's going to be a harder road. But you know what? I like it because I like seeing big names on that schedule. If I could just be crazy about it and it would say like, all right, they might not even be bowl eligible with this. If I could flip out like Indiana and flip out like Northwestern and say, we're going to throw in Florida State and we're going to throw in, Oklahoma, why don't you come in a year early? We're just going to go ahead and do that. I'd be all for it, right? I am all about the big matchups. It sucks that it's a little lopsided, but I like the big matchups. To me, that's college football, right? It's so much more fun having the big matchups. So I'm about it. Took me almost half hour to get to that point. But that's where we're at. All right, that's going to do it for us tonight. We'll be coming to you from Minnesota, Minneapolis-ish area. I'm not going to be doing it in front of the stadium, almost certainly, but maybe I will. I don't know. Probably not. We'll talk to you tomorrow from the great, whatever the Minnesota State is. The Gopher State? I don't know. I was going to say Great Lakes State. It's not the Great Lakes State. That's Michigan. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Peace.